So no, we got 2 chapters to go. Do I need to mention anything else? Yeah, oh yes, yes. So we start a brand new book tomorrow. So I asked on Twitter for some recommendations there, and Chris Alberti was the only one who offered up some book suggestions. One of which actually sounds like it might be pretty interesting, a Zane Grey one, but it's not exactly a cowboy one like most Zane Grey ones are, but it's about a soldier from World War One returning home after the war, and I think that could be kind of interesting. Great Expectations, says Rose. I don't know about that. But we've never really done a big Dickens book. Haven't done. We've done. Every Christmas we do a Christmas Carol, and we've done some other short stories. Well, a couple of short stories. I can't think what they are off the top of my head, but we've never done any big novel of his. Yeah. Okay. In the meantime, though, we should get on with this right here. Let's do it. Let's find our book. So we're about to start chapter 20. Let's back up a page just to. Oh, so okay, yeah. So yeah, we did end it here. Okay, let's back up a page and a half. The girl, this would be Phoebe, knew that her 2 relatives were capable of far greater oddities than that of shutting themselves up in their old house, as they appeared now to have done. Nevertheless, with indistinct misgivings of something amiss, and apprehensions to which she could not give shape, she approached the door that formed the customary communication between the house and garden. It was secured within, like the 2 which she had already tried. She knocked, however, and immediately, as if the application had been expected, the door was drawn open by a considerable exertion of some unseen person's strength, not wide, but far enough to afford her a sidelong entrance. As Hepzibah, in order not to expose herself to inspection from without, invariably opened a door in this manner, Phoebe necessarily concluded that it was her cousin who now admitted her. Without hesitation, therefore, she stepped across the threshold, and had no sooner entered than the door closed behind her. Okay, so Phoebe does not know that the judge is dead, does not know that Clifford and Hepzibah have just hopped a train bound for freedom in any direction. Man, it's got to be Holgrave opening the door. Chapter 20, The Flower of Eden. Phoebe, coming so suddenly from the sunny daylight, was altogether bedimmed in such density of shadow as lurked in most of the passages of the old house. She was not at first aware by whom she had been admitted. Blueberry waffle? Yeah, we waffled a little bit there. She was not at first aware by whom she had been admitted. Before her eyes had adapted themselves to the obscurity, a hand grasped her own with a firm but gentle and warm pressure, thus imparting a welcome which caused her heart to leap and thrill with an indefinable shiver of enjoyment. She felt herself drawn along, not towards the parlor, but into a large and unoccupied apartment which had formerly been the grand reception-room of the Seven Gables. The sunshine came freely into all the uncurtained windows of this room, and fell upon the dusty floor, so that Phoebe now clearly saw, what indeed had been no secret after the encounter of a warm hand with hers, that it was not Hepzibah nor Clifford, but Holgrave, to whom she owed her reception. The subtle, intuitive communication, or rather the vague and formless impression of something to be told, had made her yield unresistingly to his impulse. Without taking away her hand, she looked eagerly in his face, not quick to forebode evil, but unavoidably conscious that the state of the family had changed since her departure, and therefore anxious for an explanation. The artist looked paler than ordinary. There was a thoughtful and severe contraction of his forehead, tracing a deep vertical line between the eyebrows. His smile, however, was full of genuine warmth, and had in it a joy, by far the most vivid expression that Phoebe had ever witnessed, shining out of the New England reserve with which Holgrave habitually masked whatever lay near his heart. It was the look wherewith a man, brooding alone over some fearful object, in a dreary forest or illimitable desert, would recognize the familiar aspect of his dearest friend, bringing up all the peaceful ideas that belong to home, and the gentle current of everyday affairs. And yet, as he felt the necessity of responding to her look of inquiry, the smile disappeared. "I ought not to rejoice that you have come, Phoebe," said he. "We meet at a strange moment." "What has happened?" she exclaimed. "Why is the house so deserted? Where are Hepzibah and Clifford?" "Gone. I cannot imagine where they are," answered Holgrave. "We are alone in the house." "Hepzibah and Clifford gone?" cried Phoebe. "It is not possible. And why have you brought me into this room instead of the parlor? Oh, something terrible has happened. I must run and see." "No, no, Phoebe," said Holgrave, holding her back. "It is as I have told you. They are gone, and I know not whither. A terrible event has indeed happened, but not to them, nor, as I undoubtedly believe, through any agency of theirs. If I read your character rightly, Phoebe," he continued, fixing his eyes on hers with stern anxiety, intermixed with tenderness, "gentle as you are, and seeming to have your sphere among common things, you yet possess remarkable strength. You have wonderful poise, and a faculty which, when tested, will prove itself capable of dealing with matters that fall far outside of the ordinary rule." "You got some nachos, William." "You are lucky." "Oh, no, I'm very weak," replied Phoebe, trembling. "But tell me what has happened." "You are strong," persisted Holgrave. "You must be strong and wise, for I am all astray and need your counsel. It may be you can suggest the one right thing to do." Tell me," said Phoebe, all in a tremble. "It oppresses, it terrifies me, this mystery. Anything else I can bear." The artist hesitated. Notwithstanding what he had just said, and most sincerely in regard to the self-balancing power with which Phoebe impressed him, it still seemed almost wicked to bring the awful secret of yesterday to her knowledge. It was like dragging a hideous shape of death into the cleanly and cheerful space before a household fire, where it would present all the uglier aspect amid the decorousness of everything about it. Yet it could not be concealed from her. She must needs know it. Scorpion Knight has made homemade blueberry waffles with whipped topping and blueberry sauce. Man, everyone's just trying to make me hungry while I'm trying to tell you a good story. What's up with them? "Phoebe," said he, "do you remember this?" He put into her hand a daguerreotype, the same he had shown her at their first interview in the garden, and which so strikingly brought out the hard and relentless traits of the original. "What has this to do with Hepzibah and Clifford?" asked Phoebe, with impatient surprise that Holgrave should so trifle with her at such a moment. "It is Judge Pincian. You've shown it to me before." "But here is the same face, taken within this half-hour," said the artist, presenting her with another miniature. "I had just finished it when I heard you at the door." "This is death," shuddered Phoebe, turning very pale. "Judge Pincian dead." "Such as there represented," said Holgrave. "He sits in the next room. The judge is dead, and Clifford and Hepzibah have vanished. I know no more. All beyond is conjecture. On returning to my solitary chamber last evening, I noticed no light, either in the parlor, or Hepzibah's room, or Clifford's, no stir or footstep about the house. This morning there was the same death-like quiet. From my window I overheard the testimony of a neighbor that your relatives were seen leaving the house in the midst of yesterday's storm. A rumor reached me, too, of Judge Pinchian being missed. A feeling which I cannot describe, an indefinite sense of some catastrophe or consummation, impelled me to make my way into this part of the house, where I discovered what you see. As a point of evidence that may be useful to Clifford, and also as a memorial valuable to myself. For, Phoebe, there are hereditary reasons that connect me strangely with that man's fate. I used the means at my disposal to preserve this pictorial record of Judge Pinchian's death. Now that's a little, I don't know, that seems a little weird. I mean, if I was, if I was renting a room in someone's house and I found a dead body in there, I wouldn't stop to, set up a little photography session. I'll be like, where are the coppers at? All right. Even in her agitation, Phoebe could not help remarking the calmness of Holgrave's demeanor. He appeared, it is true, to feel the whole awfulness of the judge's death, yet had received the fact into his mind without any mixture of surprise, but as an event preordained, happening inevitably, and so fitting itself into past occurrences that it could almost have been prophesied. "Why have you not thrown open the doors and called in witnesses, like a normal person?" inquired she with a painful shudder. "It is terrible to be here alone." "But Clifford," suggested the artist, "Clifford and Hepzibah. We must consider what is best to be done in their behalf. It is a wretched fatality that they should have disappeared. Their flight will throw the worst coloring over this event, of which it is susceptible. Yet how easy is the explanation to those who know them. Bewildered and terror-stricken by the similarity of this death to a former one, which was attended with such disastrous consequences to Clifford, they have had no idea but of removing themselves from the scene. How miserably unfortunate! Had Hepzibah but shrieked aloud, had Clifford flung wide the door and proclaimed Judge Pinchian's death, it would have been, however awful in itself, an event fruitful of good consequences to them. As I view it, it would have gone far towards obliterating the black stain on Clifford's character." "And how," asked Phoebe, "could any good come from what is so very dreadful?" "Because," said the artist, "if the matter can be fairly considered and candidly interpreted, it must be evident that Judge Pinchian could not have come unfairly to his end. This mode of death had been an idiosyncrasy with his family for generations past, not often occurring, indeed, but when it does occur, usually attacking individuals about the judge's time of life, and generally in the tension of some mental crisis, or perhaps in an access of wrath. Old Maule's prophecy was probably founded on a knowledge of this physical predisposition in the Pinchian race. Now there is a minute and almost now there is a minute and almost exact similarity in the appearances connected with the death that occurred yesterday, and those recorded of the death of Clifford's uncle 30 years ago. It is true there was a certain arrangement of certain circumstances, unnecessary to be recounted, which made it possible, nay, as men look at these things, probable, or even certain, that old Geoffrey Pinchian came to a violent death, and by Clifford's hands." "Whence came those circumstances?" exclaimed Phoebe, "he being innocent, as we know him to be?" "They were arranged," said Holgrave, "at least such has long been my conviction. They were arranged after the uncle's death, and before it was made public, by the man who sits in yonder parlour. His own death, so like that former one, yet attended by none of those suspicious circumstances, seems the stroke of God upon him, at once a punishment for his wickedness, and making plain the innocence of Clifford. But this flight, it distorts everything. He may be in concealment, near at hand. Could we but bring him back before the discovery of the judge's death, the evil might be rectified."
"We must not hide this thing a moment longer," said Phoebe. "It is dreadful to keep it so closely in our hearts. Clifford is innocent. God will make it manifest. Let us throw open the doors and call all the neighborhood to see the truth."
"You are right, Phoebe," rejoined Holgrave. "Doubtless you are right." Yet the artist did not feel the horror which was proper to Phoebe's sweet and order-loving character, at thus finding herself at issue with society, and brought in contact with an event that transcended ordinary rules. Neither was he in haste, like her, to betake himself within the precincts of common life. On the contrary, he gathered a wild enjoyment, as it were, a flower of strange beauty, growing in a desolate spot and blossoming in the wind. Such a flower of momentary happiness, he gathered from his present position. It separated Phoebe and himself from the world, and bound them to each other by their exclusive knowledge of Judge Pincion's mysterious death, and the counsel which they were forced to hold respecting it. The secret, so long as it should continue such, kept them within a circle of a spell, a solitude in the midst of men, a remoteness as entire as that of an island in mid-ocean. Once divulged, the ocean would flow betwixt them, standing on its widely sundered shores. Meanwhile, all the circumstances of their situation seemed to draw them together. They were like two children who go hand in hand, pressing closely to one another's side through a shadow-haunted passage. The image of awful death, which filled the house, held them united by his stiffened grasp. These influences hastened the development of emotions that might not otherwise have flowered so. Possibly, indeed, it had been Holgrave's purpose to let them die in their undeveloped germs.
"Why do we delay so?" asked Phoebe. "This secret takes away my breath. Let us throw open the doors."
"In all our lives there can never come another moment like this," said Holgrave. "Phoebe, is it all terror? Nothing but terror? Are you conscious of no joy, as I am, that has made this the only point of life worth living for?"
"It seems a sin," replied Phoebe, trembling, "to think of joy at such a time."
"Could you but know, Phoebe, how it was with me the hour before you came!" exclaimed the artist. "A dark, cold, miserable hour. The presence of yonder dead man threw a great black shadow over everything. He made the universe, so far as my perception could reach, a scene of guilt and of retribution more dreadful than the guilt. The sense of it took away my youth. I never hoped to feel young again. The world looked strange, wild, evil, hostile. My past life, so lonesome and dreary. My future, a shapeless gloom, which I must mould into gloomy shapes. But, Phoebe, you crossed the threshold, and hope and warmth and joy came in with you. The black moment became at once a blissful one. It must not pass without the spoken word. I love you."
"How can you love a simple girl like me?" asked Phoebe, compelled by his earnestness to speak. "You have many, many thoughts with which I should try in vain to sympathize, and I, too, I have tendencies with which you would sympathize as little. That is less matter, but I have not scope enough to make you happy."
"You are my only possibility of happiness," answered Holgrave. "I have no faith in it, except as you bestow it on me."
"And then I am afraid," continued Phoebe, shrinking towards Holgrave, even while she told him so frankly the doubts with which he affected her. "You will lead me out of my own quiet path. You will make me strive to follow you where it is pathless. I cannot do so. It is not my nature. I shall sink down and perish."
"Ah, Phoebe!" exclaimed Holgrave, with almost a sigh, and a smile that was burdened with thought. "It will be far otherwise than as you forebode. The world owes all its onward impulses to men ill at ease. The happy man inevitably confines himself within ancient limits. I have a presentiment that hereafter it will be my lot to set out trees, to make fences, perhaps even in due time to build a house for another generation. In a word, to conform myself to laws and the peaceful practice of society. Your poise will be more powerful than any oscillating tendency of mine."
"I would not have it so," said Phoebe earnestly.
"Do you love me?" asked Holgrave. "If we love one another, the moment has room for nothing more. Let us pause upon it and be satisfied. Do you love me, Phoebe?"
"You look into my heart," said she, letting her eyes drop. "You know I love you."
And it was in this hour, so full of doubt and awe, that the one miracle was wrought, without which every human existence is a blank. The bliss which makes all things true, beautiful, and holy shone around this youth and maiden. They were conscious of nothing, sad nor old. They transfigured the earth, and made it Eden again, and themselves the two first dwellers in it. The dead man, so close beside them, was forgotten. At such a crisis there is no death, for immortality is revealed anew, and embraces everything in its hallowed atmosphere. But how soon the heavy earth-dream settled down again.
"Hark!" whispered Phoebe. "Somebody is at the street door."
"Now let us meet the world," said Holgrave. "No doubt the rumor of Judge Pincian's visit to this house and the flight of Hepzibah and Clifford is about to lead to the investigation of the premises. We have no way but to meet it. Let us open the door at once." But to their surprise, before they could reach the street door, even before they quitted the room in which the foregoing interview had passed, they heard footsteps in the farther passage. The door, therefore, which they supposed to be securely locked, which Holgrave indeed had seen to be so, and at which Phoebe had vainly tried to enter, must have been opened from without. The sound of footsteps was not harsh, bold, decided, and intrusive, as the gait of strangers would naturally be, making authoritative entrance into a dwelling where they knew themselves unwelcome. It was feeble, as of persons either weak or weary. There was the mingled murmur of two voices, familiar to both the listeners.
"Can it be?" whispered Holgrave. "It is they," answered Phoebe. "Thank God! Thank God!"
And then, as if in sympathy with Phoebe's whispered ejaculation, they heard Hepzibah's voice more distinctly.
"Thank God, my brother, we are at home."
"Well, yes, thank God," responded Clifford. "A dreary home, Hepzibah, but you have done well to bring me hither. Stay, that parlour door is open. I cannot pass by it. Let me go and rest in the arbour, where I very long ago, it seems to me, after what has befallen us, where I used to be so happy with little Phoebe." But the house was not altogether so dreary as Clifford imagined it. They had not made many steps. In truth, they were lingering in the entry, with the listlessness of an accomplished purpose, uncertain what to do next, when Phoebe ran out to meet them. On beholding her, Hepzibah burst into tears. With all her might, she had staggered onward beneath the burden of grief and responsibility until now that it was safe to fling it down. Indeed, she had not energy to fling it down, but had ceased to uphold it, and suffered it to press her to the earth. Clifford appeared the stronger of the two.
"It is our own little Phoebe. Ah, and Holgrave with her," exclaimed he, with a glance of keen and delicate insight, and a smile, beautiful, kind, but melancholy. "I thought of you both as we came down the street, and beheld Alice's posies in full bloom, and so the flower of Eden has bloomed likewise in this old, darksome house today.
Okay. I didn't think they would be coming back, especially after their crazy train ride from the other day. Let's see. That's right, William. They got it on next to a dead man. Yeah, they did. As spicily as they could in a novel written 150 years ago. maybe longer. Yeah. It happens, you know. So many dead bodies just all over the place. It gets in the way of everyday life. Oh, and thank you for doing the share button stuff there. Thank you for the reminder for that earlier, because that does indeed help. Does indeed. You know of the pit of corpses. Good gracious. I don't know. Don't know. Okay. All right. Let's see. Do I need to? Let's see if I'll do a little smiley face here and thing. I don't know if that helps. Boom. There we go. See if that helps analytics or not like the algorithm rather. See if that helps. I don't know. Just a little bit of chat thing every now and then. Wow. Okay, we're at 94%. So yeah, we've got one more chapter to go. One more chapter to go. See how it works out. All is well that ends well seems to be this one here. Well, but boy, it took them several generations for them to work out a whole bunch of these issues. And it seems that Holgrave is the only one who seems to know that Judge Pinchian set to Clifford up. I wonder how he knows. Don't know. Well, we still got a chapter here. Maybe it will be explained. Hey, good morning, Anya. Oh, the cat for analytics. There we go. Smiley cat. Thank you. Chapter 21. The Departure. The sudden death of so prominent a member of the social world as the Honorable Judge Geoffrey Pinchian created a sensation, at least in the circles more immediately connected with the deceased, which had hardly quite subsided in a fortnight. It may be remarked, however, that of all the events which constitute a person's biography, there is scarcely one, none, certainly, of anything like a similar importance, to which the world so easily reconciles itself as to his death. In most other cases and contingencies, the individual is present among us, mixed up with the daily revolution of affairs, and affording a definite point for observation. At his decease there is only a vacancy, and a momentary eddy, very small as compared with the apparent magnitude of the ingurgitated object, and a bubble or two ascending out of the black depth and bursting at the surface. As regarded Judge Pinchian, it seemed probable, at first blush, that the mode of his final departure might give him a larger and longer posthumous vogue than ordinarily attends the memory of a distinguished man. But when it came to be understood, on the highest professional authority, that the event was a natural, and, except for some unimportant particulars, denoting a slight idiosyncrasy, by no means an unusual form of death, the public, with its customary alacrity, proceeded to forget that he had ever lived. In short, the honorable judge was beginning to be a stale subject before half the country newspapers had found time to put their columns in mourning and publish his exceedingly eulogistic obituary. Nevertheless, creeping darkly through the places which this excellent person had haunted in his lifetime, there was a hidden stream of private talk, such as it would have shocked all decency to speak loudly at the street corners. It is very singular how the fact of a man's death often seems to give people a truer idea of his character, whether for good or evil, than they have ever possessed while he was living and acting among them. Death is so genuine a fact that it excludes falsehood, or betrays its emptiness. It is a touchstone that proves the gold and dishonors the baser metal. Could the departed, whoever he may be, return in a week after his decease, he would almost invariably find himself at a higher or lower point than he had formerly occupied on the scale of public appreciation. But the talk or scandal to which we now allude had reference to matters of no less old a date than the supposed murder, 30 or 40 years ago, of the late Judge Pinchin's uncle. The medical opinion with regard to his own recent and regretted decease had almost entirely obviated the idea that a murder was committed in the former case. Yet, as the record showed, there were circumstances irrefragably indicating that some person had gained access to old Geoffrey Pinchin's private apartments at or near the moment of his death. His desk and private drawers, in a room contiguous to his bedchamber, had been ransacked. Money and valuable articles were missing. There was a bloody handprint on the old man's linen, and by a powerfully welded chain of deducted evidence, the guilt of the robbery and apparent murder had been fixed on Clifford, then residing with his uncle in the house of the Seven Gables. So it all come. Everyone. I guess everyone kind of knew, but Anya's doing a PowerPoint presentation. It's work. Whensoever originating, there now arose a theory that undertook so to account for these circumstances as to exclude the idea of Clifford's agency. Many persons affirmed that the history and elucidation of the facts, long so mysterious, had been obtained by the daguerreotypist from one of those mesmerical seers who nowadays so strangely perplex the aspect of human affairs, and put everybody's natural vision to the blush by the marvels which they see with their eyes shut. According to this version of the story, Judge Pinchin, exemplary as we have portrayed him in our narrative, was in his youth an apparently irreclaimable scapegrace. Scapegrace. Let's look that word up. That doesn't even sound like, I don't know. Scapegrace. Okay, archaic, yeah, okay. A mischievous or wayward person, especially a young person or child, a rascal, literally denoting a person who escapes the grace of God. Okay, so he was a bit of a ratbag when he was younger. All right. The brutish, the animal instincts, as is often the case, had been developed earlier than the intellectual qualities and the force of character for which he was afterwards remarkable. He had shown himself wild, dissipated, addicted to low pleasures, little short of ruffianly in his propensities, and recklessly expensive, with no other recourses than the bounty of his uncle. This course of conduct had alienated the old bachelor's affection, once strongly fixed upon him. Now it is averred, but whether on authority available in a court of justice we do not pretend to have investigated, that the young man was tempted by the devil one night to search his uncle's private drawers, to which he had unsuspected means of access. While thus criminally occupied, he was startled by the opening of the chamber door. There stood old Geoffrey Pinchin in his night clothes. The surprise of such a discovery, his agitation, alarm, and horror, brought on the crisis of a disorder to which the old bachelor had an hereditary liability. He seemed to choke with blood, and fell upon the floor, striking his temple a heavy blow against the corner of a table. What was to be done? The old man was surely dead. Assistance would come too late. What a misfortune, indeed, should it come too soon. since his reviving consciousness would bring the recollection of the ignominious offence which he had beheld his nephew in the very act of committing. But he never did revive. With the cool hardihood that always pertained to him, the young man continued his search of the drawers, and found a will, of recent date, in favor of Clifford, which he destroyed, and an older one, in his favor, which he suffered to remain. But before retiring, Geoffrey bethought himself of the evidence, in these ransacked drawers, that someone had visited the chamber with sinister purposes. Suspicion, unless averted, might fix upon the real offender. In the very presence of the dead man, therefore, he laid a scheme that should free himself at the expense of Clifford, his rival, for whose character he had at once a contempt and a repugnance. It is not probable, be it said, that he acted with any set purpose of involving Clifford in a charge of murder. Knowing that his uncle did not die by violence, it may not have occurred to him, in the hurry of the crisis, that such an inference might be drawn. But when the affair took this darker aspect, Geoffrey's previous steps had already pledged him to those which remained. So craftily had he arranged the circumstances, that at Clifford's trial his cousin hardly found it necessary to swear to anything false, but only to withhold the one decisive explanation, by refraining to state what he had himself done and witnessed. Thus Geoffrey Pinchin's inward criminality, as regarded Clifford, was indeed black and damnable, while its mere outward show and positive commission was the smallest that could possibly consist with so great a sin. This is just the sort of guilt that a man of eminent respectability finds it easiest to dispose of. It was suffered to fade out of sight, or be reckoned a venial matter, in the honourable Judge Pinchin's long subsequent survey of his own life. He shuffled it aside among the forgotten and forgiven frailties of his youth, and seldom thought of it again. We leave the judge to his repose. He could not be styled fortunate at the hour of death. Unknowingly, he was a childless man while striving to add more wealth to his only child's inheritance. Hardly a week after his decease, one of the Cunard steamers brought intelligence of the death by cholera of Judge Pinchin's son, just at the point of embarkation for his native land. By this misfortune, Clifford became rich. So did Hepzibah. So did our little village maiden, and through her, that sworn foe of wealth and all manner of conservatism, the wild reformer, Holgrave. It was now far too late in Clifford's life for the good opinion of society to be worth the trouble and anguish of a formal vindication. What he needed was the love of a very few, not the admiration or even the respect of the unknown many. The latter might probably have been won for him, had those on whom the guardianship of his welfare had fallen deemed it advisable to expose Clifford to a miserable resuscitation of past ideas, when the condition of whatever comfort he might expect lay in the calm of forgetfulness. After such wrong as he had suffered, there is no reparation. The pitiable mockery of it, which the world might have been ready enough to offer, coming so long after the agony had done its utmost work, would have been fit only to provoke bitterer laughter than Clifford was ever capable of. It is a truth, and it would be a very sad one, but for the higher hopes which it suggests, that no great mistake, whether acted or endured, in our mortal sphere, is ever really set right. Time, the continual vicissitude of circumstances, and the invariable inopportunity of death render it impossible. If, after long lapse of years, the right seems to be in our power, we find no niche to set it in. The better remedy is for the sufferer to pass on, and leave what he once thought his irreparable ruin far behind him. The shock of Judge Pincian's death had a permanently invigorating and ultimately beneficial effect on Clifford. That strong and ponderous man had been Clifford's nightmare. There was no free breath to be drawn within the sphere of so malevolent an influence. The first effect of freedom, as we have witnessed in Clifford's aimless flight, was a tremulous exhilaration. Subsiding from it, he did not sink into his former intellectual apathy. He never, it is true, attained to nearly the full measure of what might have been his faculties, but he recovered enough of them to partially light up his character, to display some outline of the marvelous grace that was abortive in it, and to make him the object of no less deep, although less melancholy interest than heretofore. He was evidently happy. Could we pause to give another picture of his daily life, with all the appliances now at command to gratify his instinct for the beautiful, the garden scenes that seemed so sweet to him? They would look mean and trivial in comparison. Very soon after their change of fortune, Clifford, Hepzibah, and little Phoebe, with the approval of the artist, concluded to remove from the dismal old house of the Seven Gables, and take up their abode, for the present, at the elegant country seat of the late Judge Pincian. Chanticleer and his family had already been transported thither, where the two hens had forthwith begun an indefatigable process of egg-laying, with an evident design, as a matter of duty and conscience, to continue their illustrious breed under better auspices than for a century past. On the day set for their departure, the principal personages of our story, including good Uncle Venner, were assembled in the parlor. "The country house is certainly a very fine one, so far as the plan goes," observed Holgrave, as the party were discussing their future arrangements. "But I wonder that the late judge, being so opulent, and with a reasonable prospect of transmitting his wealth to descendants of his own, should not have felt the propriety of embodying so excellent a piece of domestic architecture in stone rather than in wood. Then every generation of the family might have altered the interior to suit its own taste and convenience, while the exterior, through the lapse of years, might have been adding venerableness to its original beauty, and thus giving that impression of permanence which I consider essential to the happiness of any one moment." Rose agrees with Cliff about few is greater than many. Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. "Why," cried Phoebe, gazing into the artist's face with infinite amazement, "how wonderfully your ideas are changed! A house of stone, indeed! It is but 2 or 3 weeks ago that you seemed to wish people to live in something as fragile and temporary as a bird's nest." "Ah, Phoebe, I told you how it would be," said the artist with a half-melancholy laugh. "You find me a conservative already. Little did I think ever to become one. It is especially unpardonable in this dwelling of so much hereditary misfortune, and under the eye of yonder portrait of a model conservative, who in that very character rendered himself so long the evil destiny of his race." "That picture," said Clifford, seeming to shrink from its stern glance, "whenever I look at it, there's an old dreamy recollection haunting me, but keeping just beyond the grasp of my mind. Wealth, it seems to say, boundless wealth, unimaginable wealth. I could fancy that, when I was a child or a youth, that portrait had spoken and told me a rich secret, or had held forth its hand, with the written record of hidden opulence. But those old matters are so dim with me nowadays. What could this dream have been?" "Perhaps I can recall it," answered Holgrave. "See, there are 100 chances to 1 that no person unacquainted with the secret would ever touch this spring." "A secret spring!" cried Clifford. "Ah, I remember now. I did discover it one summer afternoon, when I was idling and dreaming about the house long, long ago. But the mystery escapes me." The artist put his finger on the contrivance to which he had referred. In former days, the effect would probably have been to cause the picture to start forward, but in so long a period of concealment, the machinery had been eaten through with rust, so that at Holgrave's pressure, the portrait, frame and all, tumbled suddenly from its position, and lay face downward on the floor. A recess in the wall was thus brought to light, in which lay an object so covered with a century's dust that it could not immediately be recognized as a folded sheet of parchment. Holgrave opened it, and displayed an ancient deed, signed with the hieroglyphics of several Indian sagamores, and conveying to Colonel Pincheon and his heirs for ever a vast extent of territory at the Eastwood. Man, we haven't talked about that in a long time. But yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the the deed which was it was just rumored to exist. Okay, I guess it did. This is the very parchment, the attempt to recover which cost the beautiful Alice Pincheon her happiness and life, said the artist, alluding to his legend. It is what the Pincheons sought in vain, while it was valuable, and now they find the treasure. It has long been worthless.
Poor cousin Geoffrey, that is what deceived him, exclaimed Hepzibah. When they were young together, Clifford probably made a kind of fairy tale of this discovery. He was always dreaming hither and thither about the house, and lighting up its dark corners with beautiful stories. And poor Geoffrey, who took hold of everything as if it were real, thought my brother had found out his uncle's wealth. He died with this delusion in his mind. "Oh, but," said Phoebe, apart to Holgrave, "how came you to know the secret?"
"My dearest Phoebe," said Holgrave, "how will it please you to assume the name of Maule? As for the secret, it is the only inheritance that has come down to me from my ancestors. You should have known sooner, only that I was afraid of frightening you away, that in this long drama of wrong and retribution I represent the old wizard, and am probably as much a wizard as he ever was. The son of the executed Matthew Maule, while building this house, took the opportunity to construct that recess and hide away the Indian deed on which depended the immense land claim of the Pincheons. Thus they bartered their eastern territory for Maule's garden ground."
"And now," said Uncle Venner, "I suppose their whole claim is not worth one man's share in my farm yonder."
Whole claim's not worth one man.
"Uncle Venner," cried Phoebe, taking the patched philosopher's hand, "you must never talk any more about your farm. You shall never go there as long as you live. There's a cottage in our new garden, the prettiest little yellow-brown cottage you ever saw, and the sweetest-looking place, for it looks just as if it were made of gingerbread, and we're going to fit it up and furnish it, on purpose for you. And you shall do nothing but what you choose, and shall be happy as the day is long, and shall keep Cousin Clifford in spirits with the wisdom and pleasantness which is always dropping from your lips."
"Ah, my dear child," quoth good Uncle Venner, quite overcome, "if you were to speak to a young man as you do to an old one, his chance of keeping his heart another minute would not be worth one of the buttons on my waistcoat. And soul alive, that great sigh, which you made me heave, has burst off the very last of them. But never mind, it was the happiest sigh I ever did heave, and it seems as if I must have drawn in a gulp of heavenly breath to make it with. Well, well, Miss Phoebe, they'll miss me in the gardens hereabouts, and round by the back doors, and Pincheon Street, I'm afraid, will hardly look the same without old Uncle Venner, who remembers it with a mowing field on one side, and the garden of the Seven Gables on the other. But either I must go to your country seat, or you must come to my farm. There's one of two things certain, and I leave you to choose which."
"Oh, come with us by all means, Uncle Venner," said Clifford, who had a remarkable enjoyment of the old man's mellow, quiet, and simple spirit. "I want you always to be within 5 minutes' saunter of my chair. You are the only philosopher I ever knew of whose wisdom has not a drop of bitter essence at the bottom."
"Dear me," cried Uncle Venner, beginning partly to realize what manner of man he was.
And yet folks used to set me down among the simple ones in my younger days. But I suppose I am like a Roxbury russet. A great deal the better, the longer I can be kept. Yes, and my words of wisdom that you and Phoebe tell me of are like the golden dandelions which never grow in the hot months, but may be seen glistening along the withered grass and under the dry leaves, sometimes as late as December. And you are welcome, friends, to my mess of dandelions, if there were twice as many. A plain but handsome dark green barouche had now drawn up in front of the ruinous portal of the old mansion house. The party came forth, and, with the exception of good Uncle Venner, who was to follow in a few days, proceeded to take their places. They were chatting and laughing very pleasantly together, and as proves to be often the case, at moments when we ought to palpitate with sensibility, Clifford and Hepzibah bade a final farewell to the abode of their forefathers, with hardly more emotion than if they had made it their arrangement to return thither at tea-time. Several children were drawn to the spot by so unusual a spectacle as the barouche and a pair of grey horses. Recognizing little Ned Higgins among them, Hepzibah put her hand into her pocket and presented the urchin, her earliest and staunchest customer, with silver enough to people the Dom Daniel cavern of his interior with as various a procession of quadrupeds as passed into the ark. 2 men were passing, just as the barouche drove off. "Well, Dixie," said one of them, "what do you think of this? My wife kept a cent shop 3 months and lost $5 on her outlay. Old maid Pinchian had been in trade just about as long, and rides off in her carriage with a couple of 100,000, reckoning her share, and Clifford's and Phoebe's, and some say twice as much. If you choose to call it luck, it's all very well, but if we're to take it as the will of Providence, why, I can't exactly fathom it." "Pretty good business," quoth the sagacious Dixie. "Pretty good business." Mall's Well, all this time, though left in solitude, was throwing up a succession of kaleidoscopic pictures in which a gifted eye might have seen foreshadowed the coming fortunes of Hepzibah and Clifford, and the descendant of the legendary wizard, and the village maiden, over whom he had thrown love's web of sorcery. The Pinchian elm, moreover, with what foliage the September gale had spared to it, whispered unintelligible prophecies, and wise Uncle Venner, passing slowly from the ruinous porch, seemed to hear a strain of music, and fancied that sweet Alice Pinchian, after witnessing these deeds, this bygone woe, and this present happiness of her kindred mortals, had given one farewell touch of a spirit's joy upon her harpsichord, as she floated heavenward from the house of the Seven Gables. And that was the end of that. So, okay, it's kind of one of those. I don't know. Everyone lives happily ever after. Man, it took a long time for Clifford to get his. He didn't exactly get vengeance, but it took a long time to get his clearance. To be clear, and even then, he really wasn't. He really wasn't cleared. But I think people, yeah, it did sound like people kind of knew that it really wasn't him all along, which really kind of sucks. If having served 30 years in jail for a murder you didn't commit, and then at the end of the day, everyone's kind of like, yeah, it didn't really seem like it would have been Clifford. Man, there's money in stale gingerbread. I guess so. Yeah, I mean, those little like throwaway remarks at the end there. I mean, like obviously, you know, that one dude's wife who opened the cent shop and lost $5. I mean, the only reason, she didn't have like a rich relative die, and leave him all that money. So,
All except the judge, his ancestor, Maul, and poor Alice, all lived happily ever after. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, Maul the wizard never had it good. And Matthew Maul, the son of the wizard, uh, yeah, he kind of got his revenge. I guess that was kind of his revenge by hiding the deed. Why he hid it instead of just destroying it, I don't know. But yeah, he certainly prevented the Pinchians from expanding. Back when apparently they did, after all, have that deed. Yeah, man. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was actually a really challenging read. That one, really challenging. The Nathaniel Hawthorne, he's not an easy author to read. Man. And just the way he structures some of his sentences is, yeah, that's rough. That's rough. Anyway, that was a very it was a very good book. It was, but I didn't know what to expect when starting this one here, and here at the end, it's just like that's not at all what I expected. So that was good. That was I think that was Anya who requested that one. I think, or was it PW? Or maybe it was the both of them. But yeah, made it through to the end of that. It was it took a bit longer to get through than I thought as well. So we're going to start like a brand new book. Oh, okay, okay. Brown's out of here. You've been waiting to run the errands because you wanted to hear the end. All right. All right. You can continue with your IRL now, Brian. Have a great day. Have a great day, and thank you for coming by. That was a great ending. Well, but in the meantime, we still got more story time to go. I didn't think we were going to have any time left over because some of these chapters are taking like 45 minutes to an hour a piece to get through. We persevered, Anya. We did persevere. But tell you what, there was a lot of going back, restarting sentences, just trying to like make have it make sense while reading it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the judge. Okay. Well, I guess. Okay. So it was once again. It was a book where I was expecting a lot more supernatural stuff to be happening, like legit supernatural stuff. But yeah, it fairly quickly became apparent that yeah, people are just being haunted by ghosts of the past, by guilt, regret. Yeah, I did. I did like it. It's it's boy, it's not how not what I didn't even really know what to expect of it. But well, no, I thought it was going to be more of a legit ghost story. But it was. What was the other one we read somewhat recently, where it started off like that too? But it turned out to be. I'll have to go back and check the list of books and check them. All right. But anyway, we still have an hour to go. Yeah, I thought we were going to get to like 1:45 or something like that. But it ended at 90. Yeah, the book ended at 97%. And then the rest of it's going to be, all the info about Project Gutenberg, because that's where I got this copy from, where you can pick up free copies of public domain material. And there was the gathering of ancestors by the portrait when the judge died. Oh, I don't recall that. The oh yes. No, I do recall that. Yes. Yeah, that was really good. I really liked that, and I really also liked. Actually, I mentioned this at the beginning. I really liked the bit where that chapter called Governor Pinchian, where it like talked about all the things that the governor, that Judge Pinchian was supposed to be doing that day, which he was never going to make it to. and all of the things that could have been. That was a really good chapter too. I really liked that one a lot. Made it through. Scorpion, you're reading War Comes to the Big Bend, says Scorpion Knight. Ah, I don't know that book there. Who's it by? Who's it by? Yeah, we did. We made it, Rose. We made it. Yeah, very cool. I'm very glad. Oh yeah, so the next book, we're going to start a brand new novel today. So yeah, about a week ago, I asked, I just threw it out there on Twitter. I don't know what to read next. Suggestions, please. And Chris Alberti, I don't think he's with us right now. Chris Alberti was the only one to come up with any suggestions. Actually, does Chris Alberti pop into YouTube chat, or does he ever? I'm not sure. I think he's just on Twitch. Maybe. I think I've only seen him on Twitch. I don't know if I've seen him here. But anyway, he suggested a whole bunch of books, and no one else did. So I'm going to pick one of his. It's a Zane Grey novel, Zane Grey, which it's called what is it called? Oh, I'm spacing on it right now. I should know what it is. He's but Zane Grey, I think it was Call of the Canyon. I think it was. I'll have to double check it. Anyway, it's about the World War I soldier coming home after the war and trying to get on with his life, which is yeah, and that was a very, very tough time. Very tough time. It's not Buck Dwayne, Rose. Oh, I know you wish it was. Can't go wrong with Zane Grey. How many books have we read by Zane Grey? I think we've done 2 of them. Anya needs to check Twitter more. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yes, some Jeeves and yesterday, actually some of the Just William books too. Except that might be better for a Sunday. The Just William books. Yeah. So yeah, yesterday on Twitch, Short Story Sunday. Yeah, we read some Edith Nesbit. Part of her goofy book about it's called like the Book of Dragons or something like that. Very goofy story, and it had like this young kid always getting into trouble with this teacher. It just like totally reminded me of the Just William books, which are they're like 1920s like British schoolboy stuff. Just William, that's right. It is all about you. A little badly Mr. A boy doesn't listen to his teachers. Just going out and getting in trouble. That's you, William. Actually, what's that noise? I don't know if there's I don't know if there's another Buck Dwayne novel. I know that there was the not the prototype. He did like an earlier draft of it, which got rejected several times, and then that got turned into. What's that noise? I think they have one of those street. I think they're doing more street work outside. That's been diabolical, the amount of road work that's been going on here, because it's just so loud and noisy. It's terrible. Okay, okay. All right. But in the meantime, is anyone here new, by the way? Anyone just popping into the stream for the first time? Okay, let's. In the meantime, let me find another story to read. Let me do that. Let me just turn off this book here real fast while I go through my library. Oh. Turn that off. Here we go. Into our library. Let's do it. Zane Grey's good, says Scorpion Knights. Is my faithful. Oh, you know what? That's what that is. Okay. All right. Okay, boy, I'm going to have to move that around. What would be good? Oh, actually, and actually next Sunday, actually, we'll continue part 3 of the of that Suicide Club thing by Robert Louis Stevenson. What's this one here? The door on the wall. We're gonna take a quick look here. This is by short stories by H.G. Wells. I've read a Moonlight Fable before. That's really good. A Dream of Armageddon. What's that one? A Dream of Armageddon. Oh, wow. How many pages is this? Good Lord. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 40, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 50, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 60, 1, 2, 3, no, that's way too long. Way too long. Can't do that one. What's the Lord of the Dynamos? Oh, yeah. How long is this one? Lord of the Dynamos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, this is a short story by H.G. Wells called The Lord of the Dynamos. The Lord of the Dynamos. Very good. Melissa says, you're not new, but you're the favorite, so that should count for something. That does. There we go. Let's get a little smiley thing there. Yeah, no, and I'm just looking. It says there's like 13 concurrent viewers, and in my mind, I can't name 13 people off the top of my head. So yeah, if there is anyone new watching the stream here, oh, hello. Yeah. I do this here on YouTube Monday through Thursday. Starting at about 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and we go for about 2, sometimes a little bit more hours, about 2+ hours, and working our way through novels. We've just finished The House of the Seven Gables. We'll be starting a brand new one tomorrow, and sometimes we have a little time left over. Like now, we have about 45 minutes to go, so we're just going to fill it up with some short stories. Yeah. It's kind of what we're doing. But yeah, if you are new, you can say hi if you want in chat, or if not, it's cool too. Just enjoy it. Yeah, hope you like it. What's this? See, Rose is. Oh. Oh, and maybe it's my faithful viewer trying to get my notice. Maybe. Okay. There we go. Just need a little water here because the throat gets a little. Boy, it gets a bit of a workout doing this. Okay. That should be good. Okay, you guys ready for a short story? I don't think I've read this for you guys ever. I don't think I have. Let's do it. Let us do it. Yeah, so William says that Chris Alberti sleeps in late every day. Well, it must be nice to be a man of leisure like that. All right. Very good. Here we go. The Lord of the Dynamos. Let's give it a crack. The chief attendant of the 3 dynamos that buzzed and rattled at Camberwell and kept the electric railway going came out of Yorkshire, and his name was James Holroyd. He was a practical electrician, but fond of whisky, a heavy red-haired brute with irregular teeth. He doubted the existence of the deity, but accepted Carnot's cycle, and he had read Shakespeare and found him weak in chemistry. His helper came out of the mysterious East, and his name was Azumazi. But Holroyd called him Pooh-Bah. Holroyd, oh wow, okay. I was not expecting the N-bomb here, but here we go. Holroyd liked him because he could stand kicking, a habit with Holroyd, and did not pry into the machinery and try to learn the ways of it. Certain odd possibilities of his mind brought into abrupt contact with the crown of our civilization Holroyd never fully realized, though just at the end he got some inkling of them. You know what? Let's not do this one, because this is not a good one. We've read The Country of the Blind. The Diamond Maker. Good Lord, that was terrible. Okay, well, so sometimes we pick a story and it just ain't gonna work out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Do this one. Boy, I'm just taking a quick little look through this one here. Woo! Okay. Okay, I think this one will be okay. Tell you what, sometimes even the well-established writers there will surprise you with some pieces. Stuff that has not aged well, to put it slightly. Yeah, so Mr. H.G. Wells, that story was terrible. Okay, we'll try this one here, The Diamond Maker, by H.G. Wells. Hopefully not as terrible as that one was. Okay. The Diamond Maker. Some business had detained me in Chancery Lane. Oh, we'll start that again in just a second. Okay, some business had detained me in Chancery Lane 9 in the evening, and thereafter, having some inkling of a headache, I was disinclined either for entertainment or further work. So much of the sky as the high cliffs of that narrow canon of traffic left visible. So much of the sky as the high cliffs of that narrow canon of traffic left visible spoke of a serene night, and I determined to make my way down to the embankment and rest my eyes and cool my head by watching the variegated lights upon the river. Beyond comparison, the night is the best time for this place. A merciful darkness hides the dirt of the waters and the lights of this transitional age. Red, glaring orange, gas yellow, and electric white are set in shadowy outlines of every possible shade, between gray and deep purple. Through the arches of Waterloo Bridge, 100 points of light mark the sweep of the embankment, and above its parapet rise the towers of Westminster, warm gray against the starlight. The Black River goes by with only a rare ripple breaking its silence and disturbing the reflections of the lights that swim upon its surface. "A warm night," said a voice at my side. I turned my head and saw the profile of a man who was leaning over the parapet beside me. It was a refined face, not unhandsome, though pinched and pale enough, and the coat collar turned up and pinned round the throat marked his status in life as sharply as a uniform. I felt it was committed to the price of a bed and breakfast if I answered him. I looked at him curiously. Would he have anything to tell me worth the money, or was he the common incapable of even telling his own story? There was a quality of intelligence in his forehead and eyes, and a certain tremulousness in his nether lip that decided me. "Very warm," said I, "but not too warm for us here." "No," he said, still looking across the water. "It is pleasant enough here. Just now."
It is good. Oh, it is good, he continued after a pause, to find anything so restful as this in London. After one has been fretting about business all day, about getting on, meeting obligations, and parrying dangers, I do not know what one would do if it were not for such pacific corners. He spoke with long pauses between the sentences. You must know a little of the irksome labour of the world, or you would not be here. But I doubt if you can be so brain-weary and footsore as I am. Bah, sometimes I doubt if the game is worth the candle. I feel inclined to throw the whole thing over, name, wealth, and position, and take to some modest trade. But I know if I abandoned my ambition, hardly as she uses me, I should have nothing but remorse left for the rest of my days. He became silent. I looked at him in astonishment. If ever I saw a man hopelessly hard up, it was the man in front of me. He was ragged, and he was dirty, unshaven and unkempt. He looked as though he had been left in a dustbin for a week, and he was talking to me of the irksome worries of a large business. I almost laughed outright. Either he was mad or playing a sorry jest on his own poverty. If high aims and high positions, said I, have their drawbacks of hard work and anxiety, they have their compensations. Influence, the power of doing good, of assisting those weaker and poorer than ourselves, and there is even a certain gratification in display. My banter under the circumstances was in very vile taste. I spoke on the spur of the contrast of his appearance and speech. I was sorry even while I was speaking. He turned a haggard but very composed face upon me. Said he, I forgot myself. Of course you wouldn't understand. He measured me for a moment. No doubt it's very absurd. You will not believe me, even when I tell you, so that it is fairly safe to tell you. And it will be a comfort to tell someone. I really have a big business in hand, a very big business. But there are troubles just now. The fact is, I make diamonds. I suppose, said I, you are out of work just at present? I'm sick of being disbelieved, he said impatiently, and suddenly, unbuttoning his wretched coat, he pulled out a little canvas bag that was hanging by a cord round his neck. From this he produced a brown pebble. I wonder if you know enough to know what this is. He handed it to me. Love you too, Rose. The Scorpionites, The Day of the Beast is the book that I've been talking about, is it? Okay, all right, okay, I better make sure I get the right one. Okay, thanks, Scorpion Knight. Now, a year or so ago, I had occupied my leisure in taking a London science degree, so that I have a smattering of physics and mineralogy. The thing was not unlike an uncut diamond of the darker sort, though far too large, being almost as big as the top of my thumb. I took it and saw it had the form of a regular octahedron, with the curved faces peculiar to the most precious of minerals. I took out my penknife and tried to scratch it, vainly. Leaning forwards to the gas lamp, I tried the thing on my watch-glass and scored a white line across that with the greatest ease. I looked at my interlocutor with rising curiosity. It certainly is rather like a diamond, but if so, it is a behemoth of diamonds. Where did you get it? I tell you, I made it, he said. Give it back to me. He replaced it hastily and buttoned his jacket. I will sell it to you for £100, he suddenly whispered eagerly. With that, my suspicions returned. The thing might, after all, be merely a lump of that almost equally hard substance, corundum, with an accidental resemblance in shape to the diamond. Or if it was a diamond, how came he by it, and why should he offer it at £100? We looked into one another's eyes. He seemed eager, but honestly eager. At that moment I believed it was a diamond he was trying to sell. Yet
I am a poor man. £100 would leave a visible gap in my fortunes, and no sane man would buy a diamond by gaslight from a ragged tramp on his personal warranty only. Still, a diamond that size conjured up a vision of many thousands of pounds. Then, thought I, such a stone could scarcely exist without being mentioned in every book on gems, and again I called to mind the stories of contraband and light-fingered Kaffirs at the Cape. I put the question of purchase on one side. "How did you get it?" said I. "I made it." I had heard something of Moissan, but I knew his artificial diamonds were very small. I shook my head. "You seem to know something of this kind of thing. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Perhaps then you may think better of the purchase." He turned round with his back to the river and put his hands in his pockets. He sighed. "I know you will not believe me." What are you wowing at there, Rose?" "Diamonds," he began, and as he spoke his voice lost its faint flavor of the tramp and assumed something of the easy tone of an educated man, "are to be made by throwing carbon out of combination in a suitable flux and under a suitable pressure. The carbon crystallizes out, not as black lead or charcoal powder, but as small diamonds. So much has been known to chemists for years, but no one yet had hit upon exactly the right flux in which to melt up the carbon, or exactly the right pressure for the best results. Consequently, the diamonds made by chemists are small and dark and worthless as jewels. Now I, you know, have given up my life to this problem. Given my life to it. I began to work at the conditions of diamond making when I was 17, and now I'm 32. It seemed to me that it might take all the thought and energies of a man for 10 years, or 20 years, but even if it did, the game was still worth the candle. Suppose one to have at last just hit the right trick before the secret got out and diamonds became as common as coal, one might realize millions. Millions." He paused and looked for my sympathy. His eyes shone hungrily. "To think," said he, "that I am on the verge of it all, and here." "I had," he proceeded, "about £1,000 when I was 21, and this, I thought, eked out by a little teaching, would keep my researches going. A year or two was spent in study, at Berlin chiefly, and then I continued on my own account. The trouble was the secrecy. You see, if once I had let out what I was doing, other men might have been spurred on by my belief in the practicability of the idea, and I do not pretend to be such a genius as to have been sure of coming in first, in the case of a race for the discovery. And you see, it was important that if I really meant to make a pile, people should not know it was an artificial process, and capable of turning out diamonds by the ton, so I had to work all alone. At first I had a little laboratory, but as my resources began to run out, I had to conduct my experiments in a wretched, unfurnished room in Kentish Town, where I slept at last on a straw mattress, among all my apparatus. The money simply flowed away. I grudged myself everything except scientific appliances. I tried to keep things going by a little teaching, but I'm not a very good teacher, and I have no university degree, nor very much education except in chemistry, and I found I had to give a lot of time and labor for precious little money. But I got nearer and nearer the thing. 3 years ago I settled the problem of the composition of the flux, and got near the pressure by putting this flux of mine and a certain carbon composition into a closed-up gun barrel, filling up with water, sealing tightly, and heating. He paused. "Rather risky," said I. "Yes, it burst, and smashed all my windows and a lot of my apparatus, but I got a kind of diamond powder, nevertheless. Following out the problem of getting a big pressure upon the molten mixture from which the things were to crystallize,
I hit upon some researches of Daubry's at the Paris Laboratoire de Poudre et Salpêtre. He exploded dynamite in a tightly screwed steel cylinder, too strong to burst, and I found he could crush rocks into a muck, not unlike the South African bed in which diamonds are found. It was a tremendous strain on my resources, but I got a steel cylinder made for my purpose after his pattern. I put in all my stuff and my explosives, built up a fire in my furnace, put the whole concern in, and went out for a walk.
I could not help laughing at his matter-of-fact manner. Did you not think he would blow up the house? Were there other people in the place?
It was in the interest of science, he said ultimately. There was a costermonger. What's a costermonger?
A costermonger. A person who sells goods, especially fruits and vegetables, from a handcart in the street. Okay.
There was a costermonger family on the floor below, a begging letter writer in the room behind mine, and 2 flower women were upstairs. Perhaps it was a bit thoughtless, but possibly some of them were out. When I came back, the thing was just where I left it, among the white-hot coals. The explosive hadn't burst the case, and then I had a problem to face. You know, time is an important element in crystallization. If you hurry the process, the crystals are small. It is only by prolonged standing that they grow to any size. I resolved to let this apparatus cool for 2 years, letting the temperature go down slowly during the time, and I was now quite out of money, and with a big fire, and the rent of my room, as well as my hunger to satisfy. I had scarcely a penny in the world.
Yeah, the diamonds are not really rare. Not rare at all.
I can hardly tell you all the shifts I was put to while I was making the diamonds. I've sold newspapers, held horses, opened cab doors. For many weeks I addressed envelopes. I had a place as assistant to a man who owned a barrow and used to call down one side of the street while he called down the other. Once for a week I had absolutely nothing to do, and I begged. What a week that was! One day the fire was going out, and I'd eaten nothing all day, and a little chap taking his girl out gave me 6pence to show off. Thank heaven for vanity. How the fish shop smelt! But I went and spent it all on coals, and had the furnace bright red again, and then, well, hunger makes a fool of a man. At last, 3 weeks ago, I let the fire out. I took my cylinder and unscrewed it, while it was still so hot that it punished my hands, and I scraped out of the crumbling lava-like mass with a chisel and hammered it into a powder upon an iron plate. And I found 3 big diamonds and 5 small ones. As I sat on the floor hammering, my door opened, and my neighbor, the begging letter writer, came in. He was drunk, as he usually is. "Nurchist," said he. "You're drunk," said I. "Destructive scoundrel," said he. Go to your father," said I, meaning the father of lies. "Never you mind," said he, and gave me a cunning wink, and hiccuped, and leaning up against the door, with his other eye against the door-post, began to babble of how he'd been prying in my room, and how he'd gone to the police that morning, and how they had taken down everything he had to say. "'S if I was a gem," said he. Then I suddenly realized I was in a hole. Either I should have to tell these police my little secret and get the whole thing blown upon, or be lagged as an anarchist. So I went to my neighbor, and I took him by the collar and rolled him about a bit, and I gathered up my diamonds and cleared out. The evening newspapers called my den the Kentish Town Bomb Factory, and now I cannot part with the things for love or money. If I go to a respectable jeweler's, they ask me to wait, and go to whisper to a clerk to fetch a policeman, and then I say I cannot wait. And I found out a receiver of stolen goods, and he simply stuck to the one I gave him, and told me to prosecute if I wanted it back. I'm going about now with several £100,000 worth of diamonds round my neck, and without either food or shelter. You're the first person I've taken into my confidence. but I like your face, and I'm hard driven." He looked into my eyes. "It would be madness," said I, "for me to buy a diamond under the circumstances. Besides, I do not carry hundreds of pounds about in my pocket. Yet I more than half believe your story. I will, if you like, do this. Come to my office tomorrow." "You think I'm a thief?" said he keenly. "You will tell the police. I'm not coming into a trap." "Somehow I am assured you are no thief. Here's my card. Take that, anyhow. You need not come to any appointment. Come when you will." He took the card and an earnest of my good will. "Think better of it and come," said I. He shook his head doubtfully. "I will pay back your half-crown with interest some day, such interest as will amaze you," said he. "Anyhow, you will keep the secret. Don't follow me." He crossed the road and went into the darkness towards the little steps under the archway leading into Essex Street, and I let him go. And that was the last I ever saw of him. Afterwards I had 2 letters from him asking me to send banknotes, not cheques, to certain addresses. I weighed the matter over and took what I conceived to be the wisest course. Once he called upon me when I was out. My urchin described him as very thin, dirty, ragged man with a dreadful cough. He left no message. That was the finish of him, so far as my story goes. I wonder sometimes what has become of him. Was he an ingenious monomaniac, or a fraudulent dealer in pebbles, or has he really made diamonds as he asserted? The latter is just sufficiently credible to make me think at times that I've missed the most brilliant opportunity of my life. He may, of course, be dead, and his diamonds carelessly thrown aside. One, I repeat, was almost as big as my thumb. Or he may be still wandering about trying to sell the things. It is just possible he may yet emerge upon society, and passing athwart my heavens in the serene altitudes sacred to the wealthy and the well-advertised, reproach me silently for my want of enterprise. I sometimes think I might at least have risked £5. And that's it. All right. That's okay. Okay, that ended a little unexpectedly. Yeah, it did. Ended a little unexpectedly. All right. Okay, we got time for another little bit here. Another little bit. Oh, here we go. Oh, well, yeah. I need to remember to add stream markers when I change stories. There we go. Added a little marker right there. Okay, we're going to finish up with I think this will take us to the top of the hour, maybe. But a little Lord Dunsany. Anya thinks it was just a pile of rocks. You don't believe him? Think he was trying to pull a fast one? I don't know. Don't know. Don't know. Okay. Like COVID, money, but no toilet paper. Yeah, man, those were some entertaining. Yeah, that was like a whole month, man. Boy, oh boy. Tell you what, bidet sales went through the roof. A lot of home improvement started happening around that time. Like gold-painted bricks, you reckon? All right. Okay, here we go. Let's pop into this one. Okay, we'll end up... you love your bidet. The Secret, I guess, a bit of Lord Dunsany from Time in the Gods collection. The Secret of the Gods. Zinni Mo,
The small snake saw the cool river gleaming before him, afar off, and set out over the burning sand to reach it. Uldoon, the prophet, came out of the desert and followed up the bank of the river towards his old home. 30 years since Uldoon had left the city where he was born, to live his life in a silent place where he might search for the secret of the gods. The name of his home was the City by the River, and in that city many prophets taught concerning many gods, and men made many secrets for themselves, but all the while none knew the secret of the gods. Nor might any seek to find it, for if any sought, men said of him, "This man sins, for he giveth no worship to the gods that speak to our prophets by starlight, when none heareth." And Uldoon perceived that the mind of a man is as a garden, and that his thoughts are as the flowers, and the prophets of a man's city are as many gardeners who weed and trim, and who have made in the garden paths both smooth and straight. And only along these paths is a man's soul permitted to go, lest the gardeners say, "This soul transgresseth." And from the paths the gardeners weed out every flower that grows, and in the garden they cut off all flowers that grow tall, saying, "It is customary," and "It is written," and "This hath ever been," or "That hath not been done before." Therefore Uldoon saw that not in the city might he discover the secret of the gods. And Uldoon said to the people, "When the worlds began, the secret of the gods lay written clear over the whole earth, but the feet of many prophets have trampled it out. Your prophets are all true men, but I go into the desert to find a truth which is truer than your prophets." Therefore Uldoon went into the desert, and in storm and still he sought for many years. When the thunder roared over the mountains that limited the desert, he sought the secret in the thunder, but the gods spake not by the thunder. When the voices of the beasts disturbed the stillness under the stars, he sought the secret there, but the gods spake not by the beasts. Uldoon grew old, and all the voices of the desert had spoken to Uldoon, but not the gods. When one night he heard them whispering beyond the hills, and the gods whispered one to another, and turning their faces earthward, they all wept. And Uldoon, though he saw not the gods, yet saw their shadows turn as they went back to a great hollow in the hills, and there, all standing in the valley's mouth, they said, "O morning Zai, oldest of the gods, the faith of thee is gone, and yesterday for the last time thy name was spoken upon earth." And turning earthward, they all wept again. And the gods tore white clouds out of the sky, and draped them about the body of morning Zai, and bore him forth from his valley behind the hills, and muffled the mountain peaks with snow, and beat upon their summits with drumsticks carved of ebony, playing the dirge of the gods. And the echoes rolled about the passes, and the winds howled, because the faith of the olden days was gone, and with it had sped the soul of morning Zai. So through the mountain passes the gods, the gods came at night, bearing their dead father. And Uldoon followed. And the gods came to a great sepulchre of onyx, that stood upon 4 fluted pillars of white marble, each carved out of 4 mountains, and therein the gods laid morning Zai, because the old faith was fallen.
And there, at the tomb of their father, the gods spake, and Uldun heard the secret of the gods. And it became to him a simple thing, such as a man might well guess, yet hath not. Then the soul of the desert arose, and cast over the tomb its wreath of forgetfulness, devised of drifting sand. And the gods strode home across the mountains to their hollow land. But Uldun left the desert, and travelled many days, and so came to the river where it passes beyond the city, to seek the sea, and following its bank came near to his old home. And the people of the river, and the people of the city by the river, seeing him far off, cried out, Hast thou found the secret of the gods? And he answered, I have found it, and the secret of the gods is this. Zinimo, the small snake, seeing the figure and the shadow of a man between him and the cool river, raised his head and struck once. And the gods are pleased with Zinimo, and have called him the protector of the secret of the gods. Man, that was kind of an amusing way to end that one there. Well done, little Zinimo. Well done. That was, boy, oh boy. Okay, I was not expecting that. Let's see. I was going to find something in here. Let's see. What we read the tree from beyond. We know that one. The temple. That's about the underwater submarine thing. The nameless city. Do we have time for that? We only got 10 minutes. How long is the hound? Oh, okay. No, that won't do. The horror at Red Hook. Oh yeah, we'll do that really weird. There's a little weird one in here. Oh wow, that's all older stuff again. Newer stuff. The Mysterious Ship. What's this one? Oh, this is really early stuff. How long is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. It will do that. It will do that. It's going to take us a little over. The Beast in the Cave. I don't think we've run 1904 by Mr. Lovecraft. Okay. Goes back a little early. Okay. All right. Yeah. So this is going to take us a little over time, but that's okay. I'm sure you guys won't mind going over time a little. We can do that. Yeah, end up with a little H.P. Lovecraft. I guess I guess he started writing well before. I thought. I mean, like most of his stuff is like 1920-ish. This is like way before that. Melissa says, "Don't mind at all." Okay, fair enough. All righty. That's very good. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to mention, for the new people who might be just checking out the stream here, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you are liking it. Because we do this 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific. Let's do it. Brand new book starts tomorrow. There we go, by H.P. Lovecraft, The Beast in the Cave. I don't think we've read this before. The horrible conclusion which had been gradually obtruding itself upon my confused and reluctant mind
was now an awful certainty. I was lost, completely, hopelessly lost, in the vast and labyrinthine recesses of the mammoth cave. Turn as I might, in no direction could my straining vision seize on any object capable of serving as a guidepost to set me on the outward path. That never more should I behold the blessed light of day, or scan the pleasant hills and dales of the beautiful world outside, my reason could no longer entertain the slightest unbelief. Hope had departed. Yet, indoctrinated as I was by a life of philosophical study, I derived no small measure of satisfaction from my unimpassioned demeanor. For although I had frequently read of the wild frenzies into which were thrown the victims of similar situations, I experienced none of these, but stood quiet as soon as I clearly realized the loss of my bearings. Nor did the thought that I had probably wandered beyond the utmost limit of an ordinary search cause me to abandon my composure, even for a moment. If I must die, I reflected, then was this terrible yet majestic cavern as welcome a sepulchre as that which any churchyard might afford, a conception which carried with it more of tranquillity than of despair. Starving would prove my ultimate fate. Of this I was certain. Some, I knew, had gone mad under circumstances such as these, but I felt that this end would not be mine. My disaster was the result of none save my own, since unbeknown to the guide, I had separated myself from the regular party of sightseers, and wandering for over an hour in forbidden avenues of the cave, had found myself unable to retrace the devious windings which I had pursued since forsaking my companions. Already my torch had begun to expire. Soon I would be enveloped by the total and almost palpable blackness of the bowels of the earth. As I stood in the waning, unsteady light, I idly wondered over the exact circumstances of my coming end. I remembered the accounts which I had heard of the colony of consumptives who, taking their residence in this gigantic grotto to find health from the apparently salubrious air of the underground world, with its steady, uniform temperature, pure air, and peaceful quiet, had found, instead, death in strange and ghastly form. I had seen the sad remains of their ill-made cottages as I passed them by with the party, and had wondered what unnatural influence a long sojourn in this immense and silent cavern would exert upon one as healthy and as vigorous as I. Now, I grimly told myself, my opportunity for settling this point had arrived, provided that want of food should not bring me too speedy a departure from this life. As the last fitful rays of my torch faded into obscurity, I resolved to leave no stone unturned, no possible means of escape neglected. So summoning all the powers possessed by my lungs, I set up a series of long shoutings, in the vain hope of attracting the attention of the guide by my clamor. Yet as I called, I believed in my heart that my cries were to no purpose, and that my voice, magnified and reflected by the numberless ramparts of the black maze about me, fell upon no ears, save my own. All at once, however, my attention was fixed with a start, as I fancied that I heard the sound of soft approaching steps on the rocky floor of the cavern. Was my deliverance about to be accomplished so soon? Had, then, all my horrible apprehensions been for naught, and was the guide, having marked my unwarranted absence from the party, following my course and seeking me out in this limestone labyrinth? Whilst these joyful queries arose in my brain, I was on the point of renewing my cries, in order that my discovery might come the sooner, when in an instant my delight was turned to horror as I listened. for my ever-acute ear, now sharpened in even greater degree by the complete silence of the cave, bore to my benumbed understanding the unexpected and dreadful knowledge that these footfalls were not like that of any mortal man. In the unearthly stillness of this subterranean region, the tread of the booted guide would have sounded like a series of sharp and incisive blows. These impacts were soft and stealthy, as of the padded paws of some feline. Besides, at times, when I listened carefully, I seemed to trace the falls of 4 instead of 2 feet. I was now convinced that I had by my cries aroused and attracted some wild beast, perhaps a mountain lion, which had accidentally strayed within the cave. Perhaps, I considered, the Almighty had chosen for me a swifter and more merciful death than that of hunger. Yet the instinct of self-preservation, never wholly dormant, was stirred in my breast, and though escape from the oncoming peril might but spare me for a sterner and more lingering end, I determined nevertheless to part with my life at as high a price as I could command. Strange as it may seem, my mind conceived of no intent on the part of the visitor, save that of hostility. Accordingly, I became very quiet, in the hope that the unknown beast would, in the absence of a guiding sound, lose its direction as had I, and thus pass me by. But this hope was not destined for realization, for the strange footfall steadily advanced, the animal evidently having obtained my scent, which in an atmosphere so absolutely free from all distracting influences, as is that of the cave, could doubtless be followed at great distance. Seeing, therefore, that I must be armed for defense against an uncanny and unseen attack in the dark, I grouped about me the largest of the fragments of rock which were strewn upon all parts of the floor of the cavern in the vicinity, and grasping one in each hand for immediate use, awaited with resignation the inevitable result. Meanwhile, the hideous pattering of the paws drew near. Certainly, the conduct of the creature was exceedingly strange. Most of the time, the tread seemed to be that of a quadruped, walking with a singular lack of unison betwixt hind and forefeet, yet at brief and infrequent intervals I fancied that but 2 feet were engaged in the process of locomotion. I wondered what species of animal was to confront me. It must, I thought, be some unfortunate beast who had paid for its curiosity to investigate one of the entrances of the fearful grotto with a lifelong confinement in its interminable recesses. It doubtless obtained as food the eyeless fish, bats, and rats of the cave, as well as some of the ordinary fish that are wafted in at every freshet of green river, which communicates in some occult manner with the waters of the cave. I occupied my terrible vigil with grotesque conjectures of what alterations cave life might have wrought in the physical structure of the beast, remembering the awful appearances ascribed by local tradition to the consumptives who had died after long residence in the cavern. Then I remembered with a start that, even should I succeed in killing my antagonist, I should never behold its form, as my torch had long since been extinct, and I was entirely unprovided with matches. The tension on my brain now became frightful. My disordered fancy conjured up hideous and fearsome shapes from the sinister darkness that surrounded me, and that actually seemed to press upon my body. Nearer, nearer, the dreadful footfalls approached. It seemed that I must give vent to a piercing scream, yet had I been sufficiently irresolute to attempt such a thing, my voice could scarce have responded. I was petrified, rooted to the spot. I doubted if my right arm would allow me to hurl its missile at the oncoming thing when the crucial moment should arrive. Now the steady pat of the steps was close at hand. now very close. I could hear the labored breathing of the animal, and terror-struck as I was, I realized that it must have come from a considerable distance, and was correspondingly fatigued. Suddenly, the spell broke. My right hand, guided by my ever-trustworthy sense of hearing, threw with full force the sharp-angled bit of limestone which it contained, toward that point in the darkness from which emanated the breathing and pattering, and, wonderful to relate, it nearly reached its goal, for I heard the thing jump, landing at a distance away, where it seemed to pause. Having readjusted my aim, I discharged my second missile, this time most effectively, for with a flood of joy I listened as the creature fell in what sounded like a complete collapse, and evidently remained prone and unmoving. Almost overpowered by the great relief which rushed over me, I reeled back against the wall. The breathing continued in heavy, gasping inhalations and expirations, whence I realized that I had no more than wounded the creature. And now all desire to examine the thing ceased. At last something allied to groundless, superstitious fear had entered my brain, and I did not approach the body, nor did I continue to cast stones at it in order to complete the extinction of its life. Instead, I ran at full speed in what was, as nearly as I could estimate, in my frenzied condition, the direction from which I had come. Suddenly, I heard a sound, or rather a regular succession of sounds. In another instant they had resolved themselves into a series of sharp, metallic clicks. This time there was no doubt. It was the guide. And then I shouted, yelled, screamed, even shrieked with joy as I beheld in the vaulted arches above the faint and glimmering effulgence which I knew to be the reflected light of an approaching torch. I ran to meet the flare, and before I could completely understand what had occurred, was lying upon the ground at the feet of the guide, embracing his boots and gibbering, despite my boasted reserve, in a most meaningless and idiotic manner, pouring out my terrible story, and at the same time overwhelming my auditor with protestations of gratitude. At length I awoke to something like my normal consciousness. The guide had noted my absence upon the arrival of the party at the entrance of the cave, and had, from his own intuitive sense of direction, proceeded to make a thorough canvass of the by-passages just ahead of where he had last spoken to me, locating my whereabouts after a quest of about 4 hours. By the time he had related this to me, I, emboldened by his torch and his company, began to reflect upon the strange beast which I had wounded but a short distance back in the darkness, and suggested that we ascertain, by the rushlight's aid, what manner of creature was my victim. Accordingly, I retraced my steps, this time with a courage born of companionship, to the scene of my terrible experience. Soon we descried a white object upon the floor, an object whiter even than the gleaming limestone itself. Cautiously advancing, we gave vent to a simultaneous shout of wonderment, for of all the unnatural monsters either of us had in our lifetimes beheld, this was in a surpassing degree the strangest. It appeared to be an anthropoid ape of large proportions, escaped perhaps from some itinerant menagerie. Its hair was snow white, a thing due, no doubt, to the bleaching action of a long existence within the inky confines of the cave, but it was also surprisingly thin, being indeed largely absent, save on the head, where it was of such length and abundance that it fell over the shoulders in considerable profusion. The face was turned away from us, as the creature lay almost directly upon it. The inclination of the limbs was very singular, explaining, however, the alternation in their use which I had before noted, whereby the beast used sometimes all 4, and on other occasions but 2 for its progress. From the tips of the fingers or toes, long nail-like claws extended. The hands or feet were not prehensile, a fact that I ascribed to that long residence in the cave, as I before mentioned, seemed evident from the all-pervading and almost unearthly whiteness so characteristic of the whole anatomy. No tail seemed to be present. The respiration had now grown very feeble, and the guide had drawn his pistol with the evident intent of dispatching the creature, when a sudden sound emitted by the latter caused the weapon to fall unused. The sound was of a nature difficult to describe. It was not like the normal note of any known species of simian, and I wondered if this unnatural quality were not the result of a long-continued and complete silence, broken by the sensations produced by the advent of the light, a thing which the beast could not have seen since its first entrance into the cave. The sound, which I might feebly attempt to classify as a kind of deep-toned chattering, was faintly continued. All at once a fleeting spasm of energy seemed to pass through the frame of the beast. The paws went through a convulsive motion, and the limbs contracted. With a jerk, the white body rolled over so that its face was turned in our direction. For a moment I was so struck with horror at the eyes thus revealed that I noted nothing else. They were black, those eyes, deep, jetty black, in hideous contrast to the snow-white hair and flesh. Like those of other cave denizens, they were deeply sunken in their orbits, and were entirely destitute of iris. As I looked more closely, I saw that they were set in a face less prognathous than that of the average ape, and infinitely more hairy. Prognathous, what does that mean? We're just going to look that up real fast. Prognathous. Prognathos. Okay. Having a projecting lower jaw or chin. Projecting the chin which pokes out. As I looked more closely, I saw they were set in a face less prognathous than that of the average ape, and infinitely more hairy. The nose was quite distinct. As we gazed upon the uncanny sight presented to our vision, the thick lips opened, and several sounds issued from them, after which the thing relaxed in death. The guide clutched my coat sleeve and trembled so violently that the light shook fitfully, casting weird, moving shadows on the walls about us. I made no motion, but stood rigidly still, my horrified eyes fixed upon the floor ahead. Then fear left, and wonder, awe, compassion, and reverence succeeded in its place. For the sounds uttered by the stricken figure that lay stretched out on the limestone had told us the awesome truth. The creature I had killed, the strange beast of the unfathomed cave, was, or had at one time been, a man. Okay, so that must have been one of the, I guess one of those consumptives they keep calling them. That'd be the tuberculosis. I guess maybe some of those people from that tuberculosis community, maybe. Or maybe he was just been living there so long. I don't know. Maybe it goes back a lot longer than that. Probably a lot longer than that. Okay. So that's where that is. And yes, you thought it was Yeti. Maybe. It's kind of like an albino Bigfoot, kind of. Stuck in a cave. Just wanted to be friends? Maybe. But yeah, actually, that's not even addressed. It just ends like super fast, like a lot of Lovecraft stuff. Just like, whoop, here's the big spooky punchline, and that's it. Yeah. You're gonna go stand in sun. You get a little. Yeah. I mean, the sunlight's good for you. It's got that weird little thing going on. You get the sunlight, you get the vitamin D. Don't know how that works, but yeah, you're supposed to get a little sunlight. Yeah. Anyway, that's it though. That's it for the day. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow. 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for tuning in.